Alexandra, everybody.
Hello.
Please meet Alexandra Tolstoy, who I'm delighted is meeting us in the Wilde Space room today, the Blue Room. Alexandra, for those of you who don't know, is an adventurer, a travel writer, a broadcaster, and has been on television presenting her extraordinary adventures. And I would love to first ask you, Alexandra, if I may, and thank you so much for joining us. Where did the spirit of adventure come from, would you say?
I know, it's funny, because if you looked at, I had a very conservative childhood. I grew up in Somerset in this wonderful, very eccentric house, which actually Alice Templey lives in now. And it was very English. I had a donkey, I had a dog, and I played outside. We never went on a foreign holiday. And I didn't know anything really outside my garden and my home. But I think my father is a historian, and he's passionate about literature, and he introduced me from the earliest age to very huge range of very classical literature, all the romantic fiction of the 19th century. You know, I read everything from the age of 11, from Balzac to Tolstoy to Stendhal to Turgenev to obviously Jane Austen and the Brontes. And this is what I credit my spirit of adventure to, because it made my mind so aware of the broadness of humanity and the human experience that even though I was living this, you know, really quite constrained life, I think it made me quite hungry for experiences and not just to live inside my little bubble. I didn't really know it was happening, but then when I was 18, my father sent me to live in Russia, and I'd practically never been abroad before. And the Soviet Union had just collapsed, so it was a very difficult time to go, but I absolutely loved it and just fell in love with Russia.
But I'm guessing, well, yes, I mean, extraordinary time to go, as you say, but from you know, your developing mind, your imagination, and your hunger that you say that you suddenly felt that you wanted to explore and have this curious mind for adventure. Of course, and that is an interesting juxtaposition, because there you ended up in Russia. So yes, I can imagine then, Alexandra, that one must have been an extraordinary opposites, in fact. So from a very fragrant English Somerset upbringing with everything the same, obviously the seasons, everything changed, but that would have been a very, very continuous cycle of the same beauty. And you would have had your ignition of creativity and zest for adventure through those extraordinary books that would have created this, you know, imagination in you to want to be able to pursue something else. So, but to go to Russia at a time like that, how old did you say you were?
So I was 18 and I just finished school, and everyone was doing gap years, and everyone else was going, you know, to India, to South America, very exotic, and they were often going in groups and doing something really fun. And my father said, you're going to go to Moscow, you're going to live with a Russian family, and you're going to learn Russian. I didn't speak a word of Russian.
Wow, that's hardcore. That must have been really, really intimidating.
It was. And when I look back, I think, gosh, you know, people are really nice and say to me now, gosh, you're brave. I don't really feel brave at all now, but I think that was brave. I was 18. Yeah, it was. And also I arrived in January, and it was so, you know, it was -30. And Moscow then, now it's the most glamorous, exciting city. But then it was a very, very grey city. I had one restaurant, you know, we lived on the main street of Moscow, which was wonderful with this family. But, you know, there were just a couple of shops. You had to queue. There was no fruit. There was nothing. I mean, it was proper Soviet Union. So,
Yeah,
but I think it was the family. Yeah, and because my mind was open and sort of, you know, even though that's what I think is important, and I'm trying to instill in my children, that through reading, that's how you expand your mind. It's not actually, people think, oh, you've got to go and do these amazing travels, and we can't all afford to do that, can we? But you can really expand your mind by reading and just getting into the minds of other people and realizing that.
Completely. And I think there's something very different in a book that enables you to do that, because you don't have the distractions. I think there's something in, you know, in exposing yourself to, you know, reading something on I could never read anything other than from a book. I just couldn't do that. I just can't ingest it. I can't get in the mood. but yeah, no, I mean, books are a wonderful opportunity to learn, to educate, and also just to get into the mindset of something bigger and greater that we might not otherwise have the opportunity to do. As you say, not everyone can travel. But from that, how did you then become an adventurer? There's one thing to, I guess it comes from, you know, grit and mettle, and actually thinking, well, if you could survive and come out the other side of being thrust into an unknown territory, you know, going to Moscow at that time when it was Soviet Union still, and you would have had to have really self-soothed. I can imagine it was quite hard and not very, you know, I'm not, is the opposite of Somerset, obviously, on every level. That must have made you quite sure of yourself, and as far as, you know, that you either would have retreated from that environment and said, look,
yes,
I want this doesn't suit me, or it makes you want more, as you say, that hunger that you had. So from that, what made you then think, I want to discover more about that area?
That, you're really right, because I've got two sisters who then did a similar thing, but they both married Englishmen and lived a completely, you know, English life. But for me, you're right, it was really, I think I'm quite self-sufficient, so I didn't really, I'm quite happy with, I'm a sociable person, but I was, you know, I'm also quite happy with my own company. And then it inspired me then to study Russian. So I then studied Russian at Edinburgh University, and then after that I got a job in the city. And that was when I really felt like, oh my goodness, what have I done with my life? I'm living this life. I had to get up at 5 a.m. I had to be in Canary Wharf. I was writing reports on Russian utility companies, which I just really was not interested in. And I thought, this is my life. I've only got one opportunity. And I realized I'd sort of wasted these long university holidays not adventuring. And I just felt, I want to do this so much, and I'm not going to just go and get another. So I gave that up, but I thought, I'm not going to go and get another job in London, because what's the point? I've got to start with that. And then that's when I bumped into this friend of mine, and she said she had this dream to ride the Silk Road, and it just totally caught my imagination and was right timing.
So the two things, horses and traveling on horses, is not the first thing that people think of, you know. So obviously you have to be a confident horsewoman. So when did you learn to ride? Was that something that you picked up? Obviously in Somerset you must have had a pony, or you said you had a donkey, but
then we moved to Oxfordshire when I was about 9, and then I did have a pony for a while. My parents aren't horsey, and I definitely could ride, but I wasn't a passionate. So the girl whose idea it was, she was a very, very good rider. But there were 3 others of us, and we were, you know, we could ride, but not incredible. I think the more it was because for a start, I knew we'd be going through Central Asia, which was part of the Russian Empire. So they have a strong affinity with Russia, and the history is all entwined. And yeah, it was more the adventure really that was so appealing to me.
Oh, I've lost you.
Have you got me now?
Got you back.
Sorry.
Well, no, of course. So, but even so, I guess if you are on horseback, you know, traditionally, I mean, this is a pretty raw experience, because you're going through territories with your eyes wide open. You know, you're seeing everything on horseback, and the horse is seeing everything on horseback. So I haven't done anything. I haven't done any adventure riding. I've always wanted to. I'm sort of used to being in a menage and trotting around, prancing around.
Oh, you have to come to Kyrgyzstan with me. It's so amazing.
Oh, well, we'll have to talk about that. No, for sure. I mean, I just, I've only been, my horse, I had to sell him a couple of years ago, but I do love a relationship with a horse, for sure. But the thought of going on a safari on horseback, or going on, you know, a long adventure on a horseback, is something that, you know, would be such an incredible experience. But tell me, the bit that I want to know is, you know, that deep embedded, I want to put myself out there. I want to make myself feel uncomfortable, because doing what you did, you would have been uncomfortable. This is not 5-star hotels every night. This is roughing it, right?
Oh, really roughing it, yeah.
Really roughing it. So tell me, your first foray into true adventure, which is like, am I really doing this? Am I really going to be doing this? Because this is going to test you. where did you go? You said you went through Central Asia. Can you just walk me through that sort of road
So we
map of your
started
journey?
in Turkmenistan, which is sort of on a par with North Korea. It's just the weirdest dictatorship, and it's a it's just a desert, very, very arid desert. And we rode through there probably for a few weeks, and then we entered Uzbekistan, which is obviously real Silk Road country, and we rode through Bukhara and Samarkand, which are these incredible cities, but then a lot of this wild steppe, just covered in wild poppies, and so beautiful and so raw. And you know, I hadn't been outside Europe before I went there, and oh no, I'd been to New York for my training when I was a banker, but nothing like that.
They were very different. But how do you plot and plan your journey? I mean, obviously we have a map. We can go, okay, geographically I can go from here to here. But there are so many things you have to consider, which is your safety paramount, right? So, you know, obviously going into a territory that might be hostile. You know, so who was responsible for the research? Because this was not televised, right? This wasn't like
no,
it was...
and we did a year and a half of preparation. So we split really, and I was doing the Central Asian logistics, and I found like a sort of a ground agent I found guides through them. One of the guides found the horses, and they had the amazing thing about Central Asia, they have the most incredible maps, because it was all during the Great Game. You know, there was this big area where the Russians and the British were fighting over this very geopolitically, you know, important area. And so it has been incredibly well mapped, and it's amazing. We could ride, it was just wonderful. You could ride completely off the roads, off the beaten track, everywhere, through tiny villages, through valleys and mountains. And then when we got into China, it was much more difficult, because China is obviously still very, very state controlled, and you had to have all these sort of permissions. Again, we used a kind of ground agent who organized guides for us and camels, but we were much more restricted there. And because it's so densely populated, China, when we rode around the Taklamakan Desert for 3 months, and you're sort of stuck to a track, because the desert is so enormous and so so hot, and that you can't really enter deep into it. So you are restricted to going around the edge of it. But it was still wonderful, because it was pretty empty. There were tiny villages. And then when you got into the more mainland China, we were, you know, that was a complete different experience. We were really riding through densely populated little villages and towns on our camel.
I can imagine. Oh, for heaven's sake, extraordinary on your camels. It was horses and camels, yes?
Horses for 3 months, yeah, and then camels for 6.
Oh my word, you must have been butt sore. But you know, did you have satellite? Did you have telephones? I mean, because holy moly, these are things that you know you're going into. It's not just about, you know, as you say, there are state controlled areas where you really need to have done your due diligence beforehand, logistically, to find out, you know, where are the borders, have I got my passes, is this okay, as well as the practical things like, you know, food, you know, where do you sleep? Things go wrong when you travel, you know, you can get lost. How did you have what was your, you know, in emergency break glass? Was that like a satellite phone?
We did have a satellite phone with us. This was way before, it was 1999, which, it was way before mobile phones. We just didn't have mobile phones then. And we had a satellite phone. So it was very, very expensive to use. So we would maybe once a week dial into it and get emails, but we wouldn't use it as a phone. I once got very ill. I got amoebic dysentery, and we phoned a doctor. But I think that made it wonderful. And actually, I often think now, because I feel sad, I've only got 5 photos from the whole trip.
No,
or, 20 or something, and we were taking them on a camera, so we never knew, is it a good photo or is it a bad photo? And I think, gosh, you know, if we'd had an iPhone, can you imagine the footage that we would have had? It would have been unbelievable, but it would have been a very, very different experience. So I don't regret that.
But I suppose in a way it was your personal experience, you know,
exactly.
and it was being alive to it and being connected to it. And exactly. I think, you know, as you say, it's a wonderful thing to document, but you've got that here, and it's your own personal immersion into that. But for them to sort of again want to do that but to be supported and televised and documented and for you to present it. How did that come about? Because obviously that there was still, you wanted to do more, because again, that was quite telling as to your desire, your appetite to want to go further.
After the Silk Road, I then rode for 6 months around Mongolia, and then without even, on the first day our satellite phone got drowned in a river. So then we really were, it was just me and one girlfriend, we really were with no connection at all. But it was wonderful. And then I did another big expedition, and then I was very, very lucky. The BBC, they'd obviously read about me in the papers, and they contacted me, the development department in Wales, and said, we're making these programs, and would you like to present it? And I said, of course I would like to present it. And I'd had no TV experience at all, but we did a taster, and it got commissioned. And now, you know, at the time I didn't quite appreciate how incredibly lucky I was. You know, so many of these, as you know, probably development projects floating around and don't get commissioned. So
they don't.
Yeah, and it's not, you know, because they're a bad idea. It's just there are a lot of ideas, aren't there? So I was very, very lucky. And then I went to live in northern Siberia, in Montana, and in Spain with these horse-based communities.
Oh, extraordinary.
I was very
lucky. But I mean, now obviously this was before you were a mother.
Yeah.
So you had that.
Well, I was pregnant on the last one.
Oh my gracious me.
Doing barrel racing in Montana, which was terrifying.
Well, you tell me you weren't pregnant when you were doing that.
No, I was. Yes, I was.
Oh, so, wow. Okay,
good.
that's a bit health and safety, not.
Well, they didn't know. I didn't tell them.
Oh my great. But this is it. This is one of the things that I think is so great for all women, you know, to just think, you know, that there is depth and there is tenacity and there is strength to women. And I think, you know, and I'm not, by the way, an overt feminist. I'm not going to start beating my chest, you know,
I agree. I think
burning bras, but I'm just really proud of how plucky we can be, in as far as I think it's not just a mental strength, but I think it's that knowledge that we actually have got an incredible physical strength and a resolve, and I think that's inherent in women. And I'm hoping that through the sort of, you know, commentary that you're doing and how we communicate through Romilly Wilde, is that, you know, to have that spirit, to have that, I'm scared, but I can do it. And not listening to people who, you know, those soothsayers who say, oh, I wouldn't, or I shouldn't, you know, you really ought not to do that, because either, you know, obviously, you know, some things are just damn impractical or downright dangerous. But, you know, if there's this sort of burning hunger that you said you had from a young age to explore and discover, then, you know, that can manifest in lots of different ways. We can't all do the exciting, very romantic, but quite, you know, challenging adventures that you did, and I hope will continue to do. But there are other things you can do within that will express or fulfill that desire, that appetite. But very much, you know, now that, I mean, I do want to ask, actually, I know it's not on our list of questions, but do you want to do more? Have you got something, have you got an itch you need to scratch when it comes to another country, perhaps, potentially?
Well, do you know, I just love Russia so much. It's really, it is my life, and I really feel homesick for it. So, and especially now during coronavirus, I haven't been able to travel there. So I am working on this very exciting project to potentially do some documentaries in Russia, on Russia, but for UK TV, obviously. And yes, I am. I mean, while my children were little, I didn't want to go and leave them. And inevitably, you know, when I made those horse programs, I was away for 3 weeks or a month or something. It's just impossible when you have children. But they're getting older now. And yeah, I really, and what I'd like to do more of is I love engaging with people, and I love meeting, you know, in my travels, I rode all through Russia. So I was staying in these tiny villages with the most, you know, Russia is absolutely enormous, staying in the simplest houses. And I find other people's lives so interesting that, and I'd love to show more that Russia, you know, is a country of humans. It's not just Putin and spies and
It's not a James Bond movie. No. It's
wonderful, creative, and very rural, down to earth. Yeah, it's tough and very, very tough people.
Very, very tough people. I mean, and those communities that have each other's backs and they stick together and they support each other, and they have to be extraordinarily resourceful because, you know, their climate is really, really harsh, really brutal. As you say, you know, their winters are -30 on average, and that is hardcore. So, I mean, I need to ask, because I know that I'm curious myself, is that, okay, what was your scariest moment?
I don't think it's in my life or on one of my travels.
No, on your travels.
Well, when I did this trip riding from Turkmenistan to Moscow to Red Square, and we were riding these Khaltake stallions, which are these Turkmen, incredibly finely bred. They look like, well, sort of, they're meant to predate the thoroughbred and the Arab. And because they're stallions, they fight like crazy. And that could be really, really scary, because the worst thing was you'd be riding somewhere and you'd spot a herd of mares and their stallion circling around them, and you knew they could literally attack you. And I did find that terrifying.
Wow. I didn't expect you to say that. When I asked you what would have scared you the most, what would have made you fear for your life, I just would have thought, you know, that perhaps you were held at gunpoint, or the thought of being held hostage, or falling off a cliff. It wasn't the humans; it was the horses. Yeah. You know, I can relate to that, because I'm very, very conscious of how strong horses are after having oh my word, and in the wild, their wild state. I mean, yeah, you got to respect the beast. You got to respect the beast, which makes me admire you even more. My God, the dreams you must have if you just a wonderful thing to share with your children. That, and I'm sure you've done this. Well, it is documented. You know, you have been written about. You've been on television. You've been able to communicate, you know, yourself about your adventures. We can see it, and it's wonderful to watch, and everybody should watch. But for your children, they must be very proud of you, because I think it's great for a child, boy or girl, to grow up thinking anything's possible in a way. And especially now, more than ever, especially now, when there is a lot of access and too many options in a way, to bring it down to basics, which is exploring our wider world, respecting nature, having the planning, the foresight to be able to you know, properly have a roadmap as to, you know, how you can create something for yourself that means you have your own story, that grows you, that will grow your own expression, your own personality, your own, you know, hunger to develop, and to just to ask questions, to have that curious mind, that inquiring mind, just to want to know how the world exists on a basic level. As you say, these little rural communities, and how I'm sure, were very welcoming, and you probably slept in little dusty corners.
Yeah, sometimes you come into a village and they would be the tidiest, most clean, kind, welcoming, and it was all sort of perfect, like out of a fairy tale. And then the next village you'd come to, they'd all be drunk, and you would feel it was quite frightening and dark. And I mean, there was always a man in the team, so I would never do it with literally just women. I think you would be scared. But it was funny how a community, you know, when you have these small communities, they take on a character, and it's quite a strong character. But mostly overall, they were just wonderful people, yeah.
So, but which leads me to my final question, which is, I know that you want to do more, and you've told us about, you know, your plans. I can't wait. We should all keep our eyes peeled as to what you're up to next. Please do let me know, Alexandra, won't you, as to what you're doing next, because I might try and come along. But how does, when you collect everything in your mind and your memory of all the beauty and the vividness and the extraordinary, you know, things that you've witnessed and seen and lived through, how does that relate to your day to day? I mean, I'm, you know, assuming during lockdown you're in Oxfordshire still, yes?
No, now we're in London because my son's been at school for a month.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So a bit of normal city life, but how does it inspire your day-to-day life? I mean, you say you're creating more, you're wanting to create more content to communicate, but, do you get those little sort of, sparks of excitement that make you want to just, write more, travel more, expand outside of, maybe Eastern Europe and perhaps go to the Africas or the Americas or anything like that? Do you want to just really make this more of a global?
I do, but I think the reason that I love traveling in Russia and Central Asia is because I speak the language, and I think it's so, without communication, travel's almost not pointless, but it just has so much less meaning. And I still feel, now I have a business where I take people riding in Kyrgyzstan, and it gives me so much pleasure to introduce people to this amazing place and to see them being so happy and fulfilled, and I just love sharing this experience. And actually, in the last month, I've had so many inquiries because obviously people are getting so desperate to get out of lockdown and I think people feel they want to travel now, especially something very connected to nature and get out.
You're so right. This is, they want wilderness, they want nature. Exactly. They want to immerse themselves in, they want to get away from, from everything that is being rammed down their throats, and it's all television and social media and stuff like that. That's not real life. It's how often it's communicated, but real life is out there. Mm-hmm. But tell me, I'm guessing that you accommodate different levels of riding abilities, and what kind of horses do you obviously find the right horses for the right ability?
Last year I took my children, and my daughter was 7, and she did the whole trip. So we ride about 20 kilometers a day, and she did it. She was cantering, she was trotting. So the horses are absolutely just incredible. They're all stallions, but they're all incredibly well behaved, and they don't fight, they don't kick. And because they're shepherd's horses, they're just so fit, and they don't, English horses are way too spoiled and do stupid things and, can be very unpredictable. But these horses are completely reliable. They, go up a mountain, they trot, they canter. So you feel like you're riding, but you feel very safe. And it's not trekking. Because in Mongolia...
And are you riding Western or English?
So it's more Western really. They have a very high pommeled saddle. But it's very, and the shepherds, so I take 6 guides on horseback, and they're from the local area, and they know all the horses, and they'll match you to your horse, and they make sure that everyone, has the horse that they're suited to. And the saddles, they're great for long riding like that.
You feel so seated in a pommeled Western saddle, so exactly. You feel, especially for 20 hours.
True. Yeah.
And so if anybody wanted to book, how would they find this adventure?
alexandratolstoy.co.uk.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we will share that and put that on our Wilde Space. When's the best time of year to go?
So I do it in a very short space of time, which is June, because in June it's really warm. It's the most wonderful weather. It's hot in the day, not too cold at night. No, not cold at all at night, actually. And the most amazing flowers. You just wouldn't believe the wild flowers. It's the biggest walnut forest in the world. And you're riding through woods and wild flower meadows and, near waterfalls and lakes. I mean, it's like the Garden of Eden. It's just incredible.
Oh, my word. That just makes me feel quite emotional. Just even hearing you say that makes me...
There's hollyhocks. You're wild through fields of hollyhocks, lupins. I mean, I take a lot of people who love flowers as well.
Yes.
Not just horses. So,
but just in those riding hours, there'll be such immense peace. And
oh my gosh, peace, exactly.
It's just like meditation. I mean, just glorious. And trust me, right now, I think we all feel the same. Is that we are craving that sort of adventure, and that sounds like a beautiful experience. So I think I might want to book that as well. That would be so special. I would love to do that. But Alexandra, we need to close it off today, but I hope that we'll invite you back on board and we'll do something else, because as I said to you at the beginning, I think when we were off record, that you're a woman after my own heart, you know, and we haven't met, and I would very much like to meet, and we will do soon. I think there are a lot of similarities, you know, in everything that you've said that I can relate to, and I just think, yeah, I would do that too. And so it's been very exciting for me to talk to you, and watch this space, everybody. There might be an opportunity for the Wilde Space and Alexandra Tolstoy to do something quite exciting together. We'll see.
Yeah.
I will certainly keep close with you, and you do keep us close as to what you're planning and where we can see you next. But I'll let everybody know through our own platform. But it's been a real joy meeting you.
No, thank you.
Through this, and
very happy to be asked.
Absolute privilege. And look after yourself and your children in London.
I will, yeah.
And we'll be in touch very soon.
Exactly.
Yes, that would be fantastic. But we'll be in touch soon. Alexandra, thank you so much for your time. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.